everyone. This is David Ellis, and I'm here with a very special guest, Rick Tilson. And Rick is a very interesting individual because Rick has a lot of stuff that he is going to share with us. And I'm doing this interview specifically because we'll be running Awakening Aliens, which is a sort of lecture that Rick gives on the background to our understanding or our experiences where alien encounters are concerned. And I want to make sure that you guys know who it is that is lecturing you guys. And so we're making this short video interview. So Rick, tell us about yourself. Tell us everything. Your dentist, your SSN number. Never mind. Go ahead.
She is Lee Truong from Regina, and she works in Moose Jaw here, and she is wonderful. A true artist, my dentist. But I'm sure you really didn't want to hear about my dentist.
No, but tell us about yourself.
So, if you believe I have a past, I would be. My story goes that I was born on the shores of Lake of the Woods, which is in Manitoba, Ontario, and Minnesota, international water. And my family, we were on a family farm. And I'll tell you about the hornets, the wasps. When I was 4, we'd been away from the farm. My father worked for my grandfather in the logging camp. And that work is usually done in the winter in Northwest Ontario in that area because it's so boggy, the land. And in the summer, we had been up at the bush camp surveying timber to be cut the next winter. So it was unusual to be away from the farm in the summertime. And as soon as the car stopped when we got home, when I was 4, I didn't, I no more than waited for the car to stop, and I was out the door and ran over to the sawdust pile where my toy trucks and graders and so on were, jumped into the sawdust pile, and then the next sensation is like someone is touching me all over with lit cigarettes. And my next perspective is 10 feet above the head of little Ricky sitting on the sawdust pile. And my first thought was, oh, we don't need bodies to exist here. And oh, there's no such thing as death. I knew that as an absolute certainty from the time I was 4 years old from that incident. And then in the next instant, I'm back in the body running to the house crying. And my mother and my grandmother put me in a tub of warm water with baking soda and counted 33 stings. That particular grandmother died in her 100th year. And when my son and I would go and visit her in the last couple of years of her life, she would always ask me, how many stings did you get that time when you were little? And I'd say 33, Grandma. And she'd say, oh my, that was a lot for a little body. That must have been almost fatal. And I would say, well, it was fatal, Grandma. There were no survivors. And she would get a slight smile on her face because she'd had a few near-death experiences of her own by that time. Whether that's what got me interested in, out of bodies and occult stuff, I'm not sure. Our family has always seen flying saucers. That's just a part of growing up. Was my grandma, that same grandma, and her husband, Grandpa, were on the way to Winnipeg, which was the closest big town to that area. And halfway to Winnipeg, a flying saucer flew low across the road in front of them. They got to their hotel in Winnipeg, and the people next door to them in the next room were talking about this flying saucer that crossed the road in front of them on their way. And so then Grandma and Grandpa joined into the conversation. So I mean, that's growing up. It was a common thing for sure, not uncommon. And I would say probably almost everybody has had some kind of run-in with flying saucers and aliens and so on, whether they recognized it that way or not. So then my family moved first to Gladstone, Manitoba, and eventually to Moose Jaw, because we were heading for the Rocky Mountains, actually. But when we got to Moose Jaw, we just stayed here and didn't go any further.
Makes sense. And so, Rick, you're also involved with the Monroe Institute. And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So in because of my interest in classic out of body and out of body in general, In 1980, I bought Bob Monroe's book called Journeys Out of the Body, which was written in what, I think 1971 or so, and in the 70s anyway. And it became quickly the cult classic in the classic out-of-body literature available at that time, because there wasn't a lot of really good literature available about classic out-of-bodies in particular and out-of-bodies in general, right? Like astral projection, as it was called by many people. I bought Bob's book, read it in 1980, thought it was the best book I ever read. In the back of the book, there was a little blurb about the Monroe Institute, and I thought, one day I'm going to go there. And as so often happens, life gets in the way, and I ended up buying a farm and getting married and having kids. And, you know, I would hear an interview with Bob Monroe on the radio, and I got to go to the Monroe Institute. No, you know, a faithful family man with kids doesn't go running off to the Monroe Institute or some crazy place like that, right? So then for my birthday in 96, I bought something called the Gateway Voyage program. And that would happen in February of 97. And that was the first time that I went to Monroe. Mm-hmm. And other than the entertainment of having kids, it was probably the most absolutely wonderful thing I had ever done in my life. And as a special gift to myself, I would buy myself a trip there every year since that time. Mm-hmm. My son and daughter, I used to alternate taking them on winter holidays somewhere. And when my son was 16, he couldn't decide where he wanted to go. And I said, well, how about going to Monroe? And he said, sure, let's do that. At the end of that week, he said, this is where we're going for our winter holiday from now on, Dad. I said, that's good for me. When my son and I were in Peru, we met a woman from McLean, which is just outside DC, a 2-hour drive from the Monroe Institute. And because the three of us were the only English-speaking people on the tour, they kept dumping us off at the same place for lunch and supper and so on. And so I was always nagging her or explaining to her about the Monroe Institute and how it's so close by. And if I lived there, I'd be going down there all the time. And blah, blah, blah. And she said that she went on cruises for her holidays. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, this is the best cruise you will ever take. Better people, better program, all the way around. Take the Monroe cruise. So she finally went there. Now she's been there like, I don't know, 37 times or something. Almost twice as many times as me.
Listen, I got to tell the audience exactly how we met. So, guys, Rick is a very dear friend of Bob Hill, who does the channeling, who I broadcast every now and again on our network. And there was a little bit of a meeting at Rick's house, and I totally creeped out on this man's house. He has artifacts from all over the world, metaphysical artifacts, alien stuff, and I totally creeped out. I was like, I pulled out the camera, I started touching things, right? It was like a museum for the occult, and I'm like, this house doesn't need to belong to you. This should be a museum. And so we got together, and I realized that we also have a special love of using technology for esoteric purposes. And like, I have a Lucia light and I have a PEMF mat, and Rick has a bunch of devices, including HemiSync at his home. Before we get into the alien thing, could you just give them an overview of the devices that you have used and what you recommend when you're talking about augmenting your esoteric experiences, technological devices, that being?
Well, the HemiSync, the binaural beats that Monroe uses, I highly recommend taking at least a weekend workshop. But anyone who wants to learn meditation made easy, the Monroe system is perfect. Mm-hmm. It takes all the work out of it for you. And the binaural beats really enhance the meditation experience. Monroe used a whole bunch of belief systems kind of compounding each other, like the group meditation experience. When two or more are gathered in my name, that is a very powerful belief that most of, if not all of humanity holds. And so that's one belief. They combine different psychological tricks as well. as things that Buddhists and so on have used for years to enhance meditation. And so that is one thing. You can buy hemisync binaural beats from either Interstate Industries or the Monroe Institute online. Like everybody wants digital stuff today. You can buy the CDs as well. Something that has nothing to do with meditation, but that I really do like, is these devices from Russia, often called Skinar, but they're this one is cosmotic. On Gaia, they do a little talk about suppressed technologies with Emery Smith.
Yes.
And he explains these devices because he saw them in the secret space program when he worked in those projects. And he said the cosmonauts from the Soviet Union all had these. And it's got silver electrodes that ask your body 47 different questions. And then, depending on the biofeedback answer that it gets, it calculates the dose and the frequency to start pumping into your body to assist with healing. And these are magical. They're expensive, but they work. And if anyone is interested in them, LET Medical is the place to get them. And they're a safe place to deal with directly. You can get them on Amazon too. But if you go to LET directly, it's kind of like you join their club and then they'll tell you all kinds of information they've learned through the years with these. And there's several different models of these. Those aren't really for meditation, I guess they're more for healing, but they are almost instant pain relief, and they work. I've used many different lasers and different kinds of a spooky too. This thing is head and shoulders better than any of those that I've used. But that's not really the question you were asking about meditation. Sorry.
No, but it's relevant because, like yourself, I understand the uses of technology when you're using the technology for very good ends, right? I believe some of our esoteric brothers are very purist in their intent. If it's not the dirt and the flowers and the air and stuff like that, it doesn't work. And that's not necessarily very true, because what man can do, man should theoretically do, unless it is achieving some negative end. So if you understand the concepts of nature, even in just a little bit, you should try to work with it more efficiently if you can. And so I generally tend not to take the purest view of things where that is concerned. So, Rick, let's talk about aliens for a bit. How on earth did you get onto the whole ABL thing? I know that you've had experiences when you were young, but what I saw when I came to your house was on a different level. I have not seen anybody with that kind of diverse knowledge and experience and all those artifacts in their house. So talk a little bit about how you got onto this path and how it became a passion of yours.
Well, I would say that many people probably come to this reality with a mission, as it were. Some just come to experience whatever they're going to experience, but there are some of us who come with a definite mission. And I would say that if I have a mission, it is to bring that alien energy into this reality in a kind of a happy, fun-loving way that people can understand. Like I say in my talk, quite often those Palladian, very loving alien beings who radiate that heart energy that loves you right to the core of your being, they are so loving when you meet them. They bring tears to your eyes. They often use flying saucers of a gray alien type technology to come into our reality. And the reason they do that is to meet us halfway, because for them, they would just teleport into the room if they want to be here. They don't need that technology. But by using that technology, we, humanity, that's kind of not necessarily right up to speed with a lot of that stuff, can understand. We can understand gray alien technology, kind of. we can kind of get our head around that and say, oh, I understand. They're using technology. And you know what? We can figure out how to build it and so on. And so some of us are here trying to assist the planet with the awakening. And I think that that's why a lot of the so-called aliens are here, is to assist with that awakening of humanity. And, you know, at Oneness University, when I went there the first time in 2013, I asked a question and the teachers came back to me and said, he is not answering any alien questions. Well, a question I asked was not about aliens in any way, shape, or form that I could see. But that's not what she thought or he thought.
Mm-hmm.
The next time I went there in 2014, all he could talk about were star seeds, which are aliens who incarnate as humans, and how all humanity that's going to survive in this new awakening energy will be human alien hybrids. We will be star seeds or wanderers or whatever term you want to use for that, having that alien influence in our lives. And even if we were born without any of that, we can change our past and ask to have that. And it will be given if we are indeed genuine about it and it's what we want. If we're earnest, it will happen. According to Kalki, the boss at Oneness University, old energy humans will eventually just die out because they will not be able to handle this new energy, this new age and this new energy. And certainly if you look around the world, you'll see warmongering people and they are insane. And they're getting more and more insane all the time. Like, what is wrong with these people? In my opinion, civilized people don't kill other people. And they don't have to be told that. I mean, do you have to be told? My gosh.
No, they don't. They said they absolutely do. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen an uptick of a whole bunch of activity. So as a practitioner myself and so on, there's been a lot of strange happenings and so on. Of course, we have a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories about alien and suppressed knowledge. Now, we know that knowledge is being suppressed or controlled, as the case may be. What is your view with regard to the flow of knowledge? Is the suppression of knowledge something that is necessary for the stability of the society, or is it a hindrance?
Well, I think that especially in the old age, we were definitely in a consensus reality. And so in order to do anything, we really needed a consensus. Now, there are always people sliding through the cracks and doing things a different way. But for the most part, most people believe you have to be born. You have to start breathing air. You have to eat food. You have to go to school and learn something. You have to make money. All these beliefs they're not absolutes. Mm-hmm. There's somebody over here and somebody over there who's sliding through the cracks and doing it in a different way. But for the most part, most people tend to have to follow the rules, as it were, right? As we move into this new age and this new energy, those rules are a lot more loose, because for the first time since creating this reality, we are going back up the chain towards God. We're allowing for the physics, as it were, of the old age, the physics of the Hathor times, the physics of Atlantis, the physics of Lemuria, which each one of those epochs had different physics. We think, oh, Lemuria predated Atlantis, Atlantis predated the Hathors, Hathors predated old energy predates, because those of us that have walked over the threshold December 21st of 2012 said, oh, it's the same Earth it was in 2011 as it is in 2012 or 2013, but it isn't. And the more we allow ourselves to see the difference, the more different we will see, I say.
Okay. And so in terms of the existence of aliens, some people believe, some people don't believe. And what would you say to those people who absolutely don't believe that this is a reality?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's a very good answer. That's a very good answer. Go ahead. It doesn't matter what you believe.
However, I do believe in what Josiah gives, the three things that are absolutes, right?
Mhm.
Bashar says it four ways. We exist, all is one, you get back what you put out, and everything changes but the first three. We exist, all is one, you get back what you put out. Josiah says, we, all of us, are an equal piece of the one. I, God, Goddess, all it is, the oneness. The reality we perceive is a reflection of the belief we hold.
Yes.
And that is a catch-22. No matter how we wiggle and squirm, our reflection is always what the belief we see. The experience we perceive is the belief we hold. Can't wiggle out of that. Changing the belief from an ego perspective can seem very difficult, but it can be done too. And I think it is done moment to moment anew. And then their third thing is you cannot fail. You cannot fail because all this is an illusion and a story. And at some point, we'll go back to being that higher self that we truly are.
Agreed. Understood and agreed. All right. So when people think of aliens, the way it's portrayed in the media, it's usually very, very negative, 9 times out of 10. I'm trying to think of one alien movie that was actually a benevolent race of aliens trying to help humanity. I suppose that wouldn't sell any tickets if aliens landed and we learned and we grew and everything was peaceful. Okay, so from Mars Attacks, you remember that movie? Did you watch that movie? Yeah, with the country and western that made the aliens' heads explode. Country and western music, the aliens' heads explode. To Independence Day, which is a recent movie, to what's the new movie that's out there? Prey. I saw it, by the way. That was intense.
Right. And also Nope.
I haven't seen Nope as yet. Don't spoil us, please. So I have, from all of these ideas, we see aliens as a negative concept. So if aliens were to land outside my door today, there would be gunshots, and you know where I live, right? I live around the same place you live. And this place is a hotspot for metaphysical activity and alien activity. And they're like tribal people, indigenous people who live here, who practice shamanic practices on this land. And so one of the benefits of living here is that aspect right there. So what is your view? All aliens are negative? You know that at this point in time in our history, if aliens were to present themselves out into the open, there would be a war of some kind. Somebody would start some shit.
Well, personally, I don't really think there are evil aliens at all. If there are evil entities, beings coming into this reality, they might be demons or something, but I doubt that they're aliens. They might be masquerading as aliens, but I doubt they are real aliens. And what was your question again? I lost my train.
Yeah, this idea that aliens are negative beings that are coming here to steal the water and steal the soil and steal the gold or whatever else. Go ahead. Colonize
like Stephen Greer says, aliens have such super technology. If there's anything they wanted, they just make it. They don't need to come here and steal ours. And they really don't, you know, as Bashar says, he considers our reality to be an insane asylum where the inmates have guns, and they don't overly like coming into this reality or to the Earth space when they can avoid it because of that. It is the human consensus that has the problem with aliens. Aliens don't have any problem here. And I like that, you know, the First Nations people, their term for alien is grandfather. And that makes so much more sense. They are our grandfathers, our helpers, our big brothers. And they're here to assist us, for sure. It is the human consensus. When, you know, people say if aliens are real, why don't they land on the White House lawn and make themselves known? They did do that in 1957 when Valiant Thor and company landed 16 miles from the Pentagon, and 2 sheriff's departments fought to take them to see the president, and drove as fast as they could to get there so that they could take the alien to see the president. When Valiant Thor met the president, and Richard Nixon was, I think, a helper or something at that time, he thought Richard Nixon was a pretty fast-thinking guy. Richard Nixon called them the out-of-towners. Valiant Thor gave the president, Eisenhower at that time, I think, a document that was like an inch thick to review. And he said, if your country, because the United States is the country that, if the United States drinks Pepsi, everybody drinks Pepsi, right? Mm-hmm. So because the United States is so influential worldwide, if they were to implement the things in this document, they would end hunger, war, mm-hmm. and eventually even death. Mm-hmm. Eisenhower's people looked at it for a year, handed the document back to Valiant Thor and says, sorry, it would ruin our economy. Really? So it was humanity that wasn't ready for the aliens at that time. Even today, you have to really search to find that evidence. And yet there were pictures in the newspaper at the time of Valiant Thor and company. Mm-hmm. And everyone knew that they had landed here at the time. If they wanted to know, that's for sure. I mean, there's people with blinders on that don't, oh, that's not in my reality. I don't see that,
Yeah.
But the awakening of humanity is to.
This is exactly what I mean. It's amazing to me, the paradigm shifts that happen in our reality. As an example, like when you sit down and think, let's say you're not thinking about social media or some other distraction, which I suspect really and truly that social media is there for to stop you from thinking. When you sit down and think, Rick, let me see if I'm losing my mind. You remember when I was younger, you're older than I am, but I remember an apple called the Macintosh apple, a real Macintosh apple. I don't mean the Mac that you're using or the Mac that I'm using to speak to you. There is no such thing as a Macintosh apple anymore. Is that my imagination? When last have you seen a Macintosh apple?
Well, it's on the iPhone, I guess.
Yes, but when last have you seen one in a grocery store? Mm-hmm. I asked, because I ask that question all the time, and people who are my age can't remember any apple called a Macintosh apple, even though their computer is called Macintosh.
Huh.
But seriously? There was such a thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
So there's like a paradigm
like the Berenstain Bear things, you mean?
Yes. It's like there's a paradigm shift where we, like pieces of our memory just go down the tubes. And if you're not sitting in meditation, like when you meditate and you're actually looking back at your life and stuff like that, and you're like, I remember this, but this is not what it is anymore. And these paradoxes make me very suspicious. Okay, so when you say that people at the time, I remember there was a news article, because if you go back into the old film strips and so on in any library, a radio announcer in 1957 made a very special announcement that aliens had landed, sent an entire city of New York into total panic. That can't be found anywhere anymore. And so I am like, these things actually did happen. In 1973 to 1976, that was big news when the alien ideas, concepts of alien technology and stuff were coming to the forefront, when people were suspecting that some of our technology were not necessarily our technology at all. And a lot of these things went missing. So I'm going to ask a very simple question. Is it that we have collective senility, or is that by design? I'm sorry, is that a difficult question? It was a very simple question. Is it that though? Is it that we're forgetting things, or is it that we choose to forget things, or is it that we're made to forget things? Because the media is a very strong influence.
All of the above, I would say. the human consensus is set up as this is what we're all going to see. But like I say, there's always those who slide through the cracks and do things a different way. And so, have you heard the story about when the Spanish first came to South America?
No.
And they came with their big ships, right? And billing sails and all that, and parked offshore, maybe in Peru or one of those types of places. And nobody had ever seen anything like that. And one of the shaman went down to the shore and he looked at the water every day because nobody saw the ships out there because it didn't fit in their belief systems. So they didn't see them. And the shaman went down to the shore and he looked and he looked and he looked and he saw from the water there's something out there. And as he kept looking, eventually, one day he saw the ships. Well, then it got into the consciousness of his people and they all started to see the ships. But until he had first seen it, none of them could see it. Could see that there were 3 ships parked out there and they couldn't see them.
I see. That's a very interesting story, and something that I totally get, because in group meditations and so on, there is a contagious trance effect. Now, I grew up in the transcendental meditation system. And so we had group meditations a lot of the time. And I found that when people were meditating together, there was a sort of the depth of trance and the ease of getting into trance was a lot higher as opposed to the solitary experience. So there is something to be said for the group consciousness approach and how it transfers itself from one individual to another. Do you think that that is one of the criteria or one of the criteria that is lacking when it is that we are a solitary? Because I've been looking at the development of certain instances throughout the last 20 or so odd years. And I haven't been alive that long, but we are becoming increasingly individual creatures, but the human being is a communal creature. And certain developments, whether it be global developments, tend to make us move apart from each other. So as an example, social media only links us together from a cerebral point of view. Does that make any sense? But otherwise, it divides us from each other. So you see a man and his wife at a dinner table and they're texting somebody else. And so they're together, but apart, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But they're cerebrally connected to other people somewhere across Facebook or YouTube or whatever else. And the cerebral connection can be altered easily by just a few lines of code. And for those of you who don't understand this, let me put it to you this way. If you join Facebook and you're going down a particularly dark path, it is because you are being pulled down that path by the number of other users on that platform that are interested in the negativity of what you're being dragged into. Right? So you get the little suggested videos and you're being dragged down that thing. So that's a cerebral concept. But in a group meditation situation, there is more than just the cerebral connection that's happening. It's more of a sentient connection, so to speak, which is more than just a cerebral construct. It's a bioharmony among people. So I've been noticing a few of some of the things that are happening over the last 20 years. We're becoming more cerebrally connected, but less bio-connected, so to speak. Now, I don't care to speculate whether that's by design or whether that is our fault for losing the connection with each other. What I do know is that the cerebral connection is very easy to alter, because when you look at a phone screen as an example, or computer screen and so on, your mind adapts the concept of zeros and ones, and there's nothing easier to change than code. Nothing easier than that. And if I could change your mind, there are a number of other things that happen. So we've lost the connection aspect, which is why when Bob has his channeling, I'm going to be there, right? Because of that bio connection as well. So I'm going to ask a question. Is this partially why, based on your story, that we perceive reality as this dense thing in front of us, and we don't perceive the higher realities that are available to us? Because the human mind is different. I know that when I meditate, the reality that I perceive on normal awakened state and the reality that I perceive when I am going to deeper levels of trance is completely different.
Absolutely. And I would say that meditation, and especially the Monroe program, having been to the Monroe programs for week-long programs, they are the most powerful system I have seen to thin the veil that there are on the planet.
Yeah.
A week at Monroe is at least as powerful as LSD, but without the drug. As I always tell kids, you know, I used to tell my kids that using drugs to alter your consciousness is kind of like having sex with a gorilla. Just remember, no matter how much fun you might think that would be, you ain't done till the gorilla is done. And that's my opinion of using drugs. For the most part, when we meditate, we already know.
Sorry, that's a good analogy. Go ahead.
We already know where these places are, and we don't need the drugs to do it. But as far as thinning the veil, and you know, everyone's different. I have a friend in Monroe. The place where dead people are, they call Focus 21 to Focus 27. Well, I have a friend who walks around in her waking state seeing that stuff all the time. She'll go to the toilet and she says, 2 or 3 of them will come along and they're wanting her to give a message to so-and-so or whatever, and like, leave me alone, I'm on the toilet. This is my time. This is what my friend will say. And another friend, I asked her, do you think you could drive a car with a blindfold on using just her third eye? And she says, yeah, I think so. Well, most of us can't, right? The veil is too thick, and we see this reality only. And with our physical eyes, we think. And yet, well, when you're in dreams, do you see? Yeah. Well, are you using your physical eyes then? No. Well, then what?
Yeah, most people tend to think that it's just their memories. But if you're driving down a road while you are dreaming, you are actually utilizing some version of sight. You absolutely are. The monster's chasing you. You got to look where you're running in your dreams. You absolutely do. You're using some version of the sight. That's a very good point you've just made. Actually, that's a very good point. And so when we're talking about the veil of reality or the veil of unreality, as the case may be, because I tend to think of this as more as unreality. We know that it's unreality. We agree. That's the funny thing, Rick. We agree that this is the unreality. We all agree.
Yeah.
The scientists agree. The esoteric people agree. This is not real. But there's another sub-agreement that happens there. This is not real, but we're hanging on to this because we know how to deal with this. Okay, I know that if I move my mic closer, I can move it backwards and so on. We agree to deal with this. And so because we agree to deal with the unreality, which is not true, because if I look at this microphone that I'm looking at right now, I know it's a bunch of atoms moving together at an accelerated rate to give the appearance of a microphone. I know the microphone is not real. Physics tells me that it is not real. For those of us who pass physics, atoms, right? I know that it's not real. I know that it isn't. So I know that what I'm looking at is not real. But then if someone else comes in that door and I say, could you move the atoms closer towards me? Which ones are you talking about, David? And so we agree that we're operating on this plane. However, it is difficult for people to understand that if we know that this is not real, if I tell you that another reality exists, where there are demons, where there are different beings of different vibrational frequency, they're going to be like, no, absolutely not. There's no such thing. You see the problem. if you could believe that, that microphone is made out of atoms, why are you not understanding that based on different levels of reality? And I have a theory about that. I believe meditation takes you through the different levels of reality down to the atomic level that Democritus talked about when he says the world is made up of small things. And so I believe is the vibrational frequency. We go down to that levels, and the human being is the only creature that I am aware that has access to different levels of this reality. Other beings may have that access, but not so direct as this dense level here. Okay, so I think that when you come to talk about occult and occult ideas and so on, I think it's just a matter of where your mind is, right? I suppose it's back to Josiah and Bob Hill's channeling. The reality you perceive is tantamount to the beliefs that you hold. Okay.
Absolutely.
As to why anyone would want to lock themselves into the prison of this density of this creation when you know you're going to die, I don't know. You're gonna have to help me with that one. Is that some such psychological codependence on the reality, or what is that?
It's because we are experiential junkies. We love the feeling of coming in here and the kick that we get out of this reality. And so we're kind of addicted to it, I think, in that, you know, that first time that you're born into this reality, you know, it might be so-so. And then the second time, well, that was a little better. And then the third time, well, I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And now you're caught in the system. And next thing you know, you're life after life after life, right? And
yeah, I get it. I get it.
And from the higher self perspective, it sees that this is a video game or an illusion, a story. It's fun. And so being burned alive at the stake, oh, that would be so exciting. I'm going to do that. And the others that have been here say, oh, you don't want to do that. You say, oh, yeah, that's what I want. And then when you're being burned alive at the stake, you say, I don't think this was a good choice.
It wasn't all that it's cracked up to be.
But you sure got excitement out of it.
Yeah, that experience was lit. I get it. Look, I think a lot of people deliberately lock themselves into density because it's easier. And so when they eventually have to expire and they know that their time is coming, this is where the fear comes from. If they open their minds while they were alive, I want to say something from an old teacher of mine. That teacher is dead now. He used to tell me a very important statement. If you want to free yourself from the fear of death, die a little bit each day. Just die a little bit. And he was referring to meditation, so that we're clear. Just so we're clear, you have to learn to die a little bit each day until the reality that you think this unreality becomes, oh, this is actually not real. And when it comes time for you to pass, you can actually help yourself that way. It's a transitional process. And I said so in another broadcast, your death should be just another meditation, theoretically. I haven't reached there yet. A lot of people haven't reached there yet, but your death should be just another meditation. That's what it theoretically should be. And so I guess, Rick, we're going to be airing your Awakening Aliens talk in the group and possibly on our platforms, all of the platforms. We're definitely going to be putting that up on YouTube. And Rick is going to be giving us a bit of a talk. He's going to be doing the presentation in person. For those of you who are interested, you can actually join the UCM community at community.universalcitizentv.com. But yeah, we're going to be opening that up. Rick is clearly an interesting individual. You might want to ask a bunch of questions too when it comes to aliens, because yeah, I've been to his house. And so if you wanted an expert on the subject, that would be Rick. Rick, thank you for being here. If you have any last words, the last word here is yours.
Did you want a little bit of B-roll here? Just can you wait a sec?
Sure.
Did we wait too long?
Yeah, I think we waited too long. I think that we're all. You are so funny. Oh my God, Rick. Rick. Ah, thank you so
An old
much.
friend who was waiting here in the background, so I thought, well,
You are unbelievable. That would be one of the artifacts in Rick's house. See what I mean, guys? Rick, I guess we'll come to the end of our interview. Other than that, guys, we'll see you guys soon. Take care.